Well, welcome back, everybody, and thank you for checking out this edition of Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. Today, I am delighted to welcome back to the show owner of the ECHL Maine Mariners, Mr. Dexter Paine. Dexter, thanks for being here. Welcome in.
Ben, thank you for having me. As always, I always enjoy it and appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Mariners. And happy summer to all of our Mariners fans. Well, happy summer to everyone, but particularly all of our Mariners fans.
Yeah, been a hot one out there. You know, we're typical Mainers, right? When it's cold, we complain. When it's hot, we complain. It's just how we do it around here. But speaking of summer, how's it been treating you so far?
It's been great. June was a little rainy. I love striper fishing, and the striper fishing was really good in the month of June, which was great. Started to tail off a little bit, but last Sunday we actually had a really nice day out on the water. So it's been a really nice summer so far.
I know that most fishermen don't share their secret spots, but where are some of your go-to fishing spots here in New England?
So we spend a lot of time in Nantucket, and I think Nantucket is just a phenomenal fishery, not only stripers and blues, but bonita, false albacore. I'm not much of an offshore fisherman. I understand the tuna bite has been really good this year, but it's not my style of fishing. I also really like fly fishing, trout fishing, and spend a lot of time in northern New Hampshire, which is where I grew up, but great opportunity to fish there.
Nice. I should have my tenant on, who's a captain that goes out of Boston. He would have all sorts of fishing stories to talk about, but he's out on the boat right now. So, well, good. Yes, summer is flying by here, middle of June already. I mean, before you know it, we'll be back at the Cross and back at the Garden watching hockey. Of course, we're going to be doing that this year with somebody new behind the bench, right? Of course, news breaking this week. We saw the tweet a couple weeks back from Philadelphia, the news about Wallin going off to the AHL. Thoughts on Wallin moving on?
Well, first of all, whenever you get a call at 8:20 on a Sunday night from your coach, you know it's not good news. Yeah. So that was about 2 weeks ago. Look, I am a huge Terrence Wallin fan. I'm really excited for him and the opportunity to coach in the AHL. It's something he's always wanted to do. He's got real aspirations to get to the NHL, and this is the next step in that path. For all of us as Maine Mariners fans, it means we need to step back and figure out who our next head coach is. Lots of great candidates out there. I spent the day yesterday with Adam in Portland, and he and I have a list of close to 50 people. We've already started talking to a few. We're working quite closely with Evan Gold and the Boston Bruins on this search to make sure that there's real buy-in from the Bruins organization in terms of our next head coach and the development. The idea that we're a great place to send players, we think is, one of the things that this opportunity provides for us. But very sad to see Terrence go. Ben, I had a chance to listen to your podcast this morning, and your comment about there are people who love Terrence and hate Terrence. Look, I think he did a great job in in Portland. I think he had a difficult time in terms of working with an owner who owned the Philadelphia Flyers and an affiliate who was the Boston Bruins. And that's a challenging dynamic to work through. I think if I'm in Boston, I probably say, wait a second, do I really send all my best prospects to these guys who are my competitors in the NHL? So I think he did a marvelous job. The players loved him. You mentioned it on your podcast. There is no one who worked harder in this league than Terrence. And those are all things we're going to try to find the next coach who has a lot of those same qualities and strengths. To Terrence's credit, he's been completely engaged in helping us find the next coach as well. He has already started his job in Philadelphia or in Lehigh. But he is very focused on making sure that this organization has a really strong coaching staff in the 25-26 season.
Well said. And I do think that's a point that people forget. Up until last season, those waters that he had to navigate, being owned by Philadelphia, but an affiliate of Boston, yeah, that is some tricky, tricky waters. And going back to last season, I just look at the way the team ended the season. Yeah, did we miss the playoffs? Sure. Was it a rough start to the season? Yes. Did we have all sorts of craziness on the roster? Absolutely. The way the team came together at the end, some of the moves he made, and the culture and the cohesiveness that team played with the last month of the season, I think speaks volumes to what Coach did, both behind the bench and as a GM. And I think I said it on one of the podcasts I just did. It might have been his best coaching season to date, despite the fact we missed the playoffs.
Yeah, we went to Rapid City last year and lost 3 games, including the midnight game, which, it's just crazy to think that they had us start a game in Rapid City at midnight. But came home, and after that, we were 16-8-1, including, beating Troyes, who ultimately won the Kelly Cup a number of times at the end of the season, and, playing incredibly competitive hockey with some of the best teams in the ECHL. I would agree with you. I actually think he did a great job from a coaching perspective. I think he did actually even a better job from a GM perspective. And I know we're going to get into that, but
Sure.
One of the things I've come to appreciate about the ECHL is that head coach not only, is behind the bench, but he's also in the office. And, you talked about the trades, you talked about, trying to work with Providence to get more support. All of that falls on your head coach, GM as well. And, one of the things we are, in fact, evaluating is, do you split those roles? There's a number of really smart people in the hockey world who will tell you that those roles should be 2 different roles. Danny Briere, who's been, unfortunately hired our coach, but also been really helpful as we've started this coaching search. Riley Armstrong, they're firm believers that you actually need to separate the head coach from the GM role. There's lots of other people in the league who believe, whether it's from a compensation perspective, affordability, or it's, that's just, the sort of model that works in the ECHL, think those 2 people need to be the same person. And look, as we begin this search, we're interviewing GM candidates, we're interviewing head coach candidates, and we're interviewing people that would be head coach and GM. And part of this is I'm just trying to get really smart around what the best business model is in the ECHL. And this is a chance for me to learn. Quite frankly, we've talked to a couple of people, including someone who unfortunately took another very high profile job. But every call that I have with a potential coach or with someone who's given me a name is a chance to get smarter and learn more about the league and what other people do. And so, yes, it's a lot of hard work finding another coach. I'd rather not be doing it. But the upside is, I think I'm going to be a lot smarter. Adam's going to be a lot smarter about how we can be successful in the ECHL after we get done with this coach's search.
I love the fact that there seems to be an open-mindedness to looking at all options, all avenues, because that was one of my questions. Do you separate those 2 roles? Is it going to be one and the same again? I'd be very interested to see where you guys land on that. I know a lot of people are very, very curious about that. It seems like again, I'm a novice here. I'm not in it like you guys are, but that's 2 really big jobs, even at the ECHL level, where, yes, I know you're not in full control of what happens within, the NHL organization, from top down, but there's a lot that goes into both of those roles. So it's going to be really curious to see, the types of people you all are talking to and where you guys land on it. I guess I'll ask this as a follow-up. What is your timing? Is this like ASAP? You want to get these guys in? Are you willing to take the time to make sure you get the right guy, whether it's 2 weeks from now, going into August, where's your timing at?
Ben, I think we are going to be really measured and thoughtful in this approach. I've got Adam and I, between the two of us, have I think 12 interviews lined up over the next week, which are first round interviews. I've already spoken to 3 candidates. We're talking to a really diverse set of candidates. As I said, some GM coach, some coach. We're talking from people who are with AHL teams. We're talking to people with ECHL teams. We're talking to people with OHL teams. Actually talking to a couple of folks who coach overseas. Look, we want to be very measured, talk to lots of people, make sure that we cover all of our bases. Having said that, we're also in the middle of our recruiting season and preparation season. And so we need to be realistic that, there's actually 30 teams. You mentioned Wheeling, who lost their coach as well.
And I mistakenly on my video, and I think
you said
my comments. I was like Worcester Railers, Worcester Nailers, Wheeling Railers. I watched that on post, and I was like, what am I doing? And I had to put the little blib on there just to bad moment for Ben.
But there's been a number. I think it's been 10 new coaches in the ECHL this year. We've got another 2 openings. So, we also need to be aware of the competitive dynamic. One thing that I didn't mention at the start of the coach discussion is, the good news is we've got a number of internal candidates. And I say internal, folks who either are currently with the organization or have spent time with the organization, who are very high on our list, who we're going to go through the process with. The last time we did this, Terrence was the assistant coach and was promoted to head coach. So, and I think that's something, that happens quite often in the ECHL. And we're going to make sure that we give all of our existing coaching staff, as well as folks who have worked with us, the opportunity to interview and be part of the process.
That's great. And one last follow-up to that, because I did put out a listener question request to the fans, and y'all did a great job of filling up my inbox again, so appreciate that. A couple names that came out that fans were very vocal in the messages. Kevin Kaminski and Derek Whitmore are both 2 names that really came up. Now, I'm not going to ask you to share any names because I know you can't do that. Wouldn't ask you to do that. But could you down the road see either or both of those names potentially part of the organization down the road?
Look, both those names are on our list. I'm not going to rule out anything at this point. I think, as I mentioned early on, we're really open-minded about making sure that we hire the best person or people for those jobs. And we're early in the process and expect that, we'll talk to a lot of different people about the opportunity.
Great to hear. I'm sure fans will be happy to hear that those names are on your list. Now, of course, not to be lost in all of this, news that Cam Briere recently getting promoted as well, all the way up to the NHL, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, congrats to Cam. What a big jump. We're going to be watching him and see where his career takes him. But I know you only worked with Cam for the 1 year, but what are your thoughts on him?
Cam, great guy. We had actually had a offsite with the entire team, both the hockey ops team as well as the business side, in late June, actually early July. I think it was the 1st and 2nd. And we got 30 of us together to talk about the business for 2 days. We had an event that night with all of the significant others, and a real opportunity, 1, to say thank you, 2, to talk about the plans and strategy for next year, 3, just to have everyone in the room be able to hear what everyone else was doing, whether it was Terrence talking about hops, hockey, Terrence and Tolks, or whether it was Sam Murray talking about where we were in the sales cycle, or Adam talking about his vision for the organization. Susan and I talked about what we're doing in terms of practice facility, foundation, those efforts. I just think, transparency, open dialogue with the entire team is incredibly important. But I say that because Cam was there for that entire event and was a vocal participant. And, look, as we said with Terrence, I applaud the opportunity he has. I mean, sort of the step 2 up. But we're going to miss him. He was a bit like Terrence. It would have been easier to lose him in May than it is in July.
Sure.
But, we've got a couple of names. It'll really be up to the next coach and GM to figure out who his video person should be. But look, Cam, the one great thing I loved about Cam is Cam was our video guy. And yet Cam was also the guy, when the team needed pizzas at 11 o'clock at night in Indianapolis, he did that. That's the kind of stuff you can't interview for, and we really appreciate his willingness to literally get his hands dirty and do anything that made the team better.
And that's what I love about minor league sports is you're not just one role. Like I know Keels has talked about, when he's on the road, he's helping take bags off the buses and stuff. And it's just, and that's the life of the minor leagues, right?
We call Keels our Swiss Army knife. I mean, the guy is extraordinary. And thankfully he's also, I think, the best play-by-play guy in the ECHL.
Robbed of that award this year too, didn't he?
He should have gotten it. Really bummed out. Maybe I'll point this out for any listeners who aren't aware of it. Adam was actually the ECHL Executive of the Year this year, which huge shout out, incredibly well deserved. Look, the guy had to manage the transition from Comcast to the Paine family. Not an easy transition. He had to put up with me for 9 months. And just for that, he should get the award. But we were really excited. Be very honest, 7 candidates for that. I think a bit unexpected, but well deserved.
No, it's great. It's great. I know we mentioned it back when it was announced. So good to see that. Well, great. Yeah. Well, so good luck to Cam. Good luck to Terrence. Both. I know that a lot of people here in Maine will be watching both of those guys as they move on. Going back to the ECHL, of course, we have this kind of elephant in the room, the CBA agreement that hasn't been agreed to yet. I kind of chuckle because the NHL beat you guys to the punch. They got their CBA done and they move as slow as molasses. So where are we at? What can you share about the CBA? And is any worries about a work stoppage?
Let me start with maybe a little background. I know we talked about it, but for those that either didn't listen to the last podcast or, like me, may forget things like that very quickly. The CBA technically expired at the end of the season. It was a 5-year deal that because of COVID had been extended. There is a new head of the PHPA, which is the Professional Hockey Players Association. That individual is responsible for negotiating both a new ECHL and an AHL contract. So both the ECHL and the AHL are in the midst of contract negotiations. I think it's fair to say that, both are, at the same place, which is, still in limbo in terms of the process. There have been lots of negotiations, lots of issues, from economic issues to player safety issues to equipment issues to housing that are part of that. Ben, this is complete speculation on my part, but if I were to guess, it's not going to be until we get much closer to the beginning of the season that we actually get a resolution. There's, to a certain extent, no pressure right now. We're signing players. Every other team is signing players. Those players want to play hockey. And, we're proceeding as if there is a CBA in place. I think ultimately we will get something done because our players really want to play. They don't have some big work stoppage fund that funds them if they don't play.
Right.
They're, not independently wealthy. And so they get paid for playing hockey. And, talking to, the Willem DeVos of the world, who's our captain, they just want to get back and play hockey. And so I think a deal gets done, but I don't think there's any pressure for it to get done on July 15th. I think, when you get to, early October, then there's all of a sudden pressure for it to get done.
Sure. All right. We'll keep an eye on that. And be curious to see where that lands. And once it's done, I'd love to be able to talk to you again about some of the major changes and some of the pros and cons of it too. Moving on, of course, something that you and I have talked about here on the show is your relationships with, Gold and with Sweeney, with Boston and Providence. I know it's something you're really adamant about enhancing that relationship. How are you feeling about all that today?
I actually feel much better than I did 9 months ago when I met Don Sweeney and Evan Gold for the first time. We have worked really closely with Evan around signing players for this year, around our coaches search. I went down and had lunch with him, with Terrence and Adam in June. It's up to us to convince them that Portland is going to do a great job in the development of their young players. I do think that there's a new mindset in Boston around the development side. I'm sure there's lots of studies out there, but I saw something last year that listed them 31 out of 32 teams in terms of, depth of the development program. Certainly with the draft in June and the signings in late June and early July, I think that pipeline is much stronger than it was a year ago. And, I think we'll benefit from that. But we need to convince those guys that if they send us players, we're going to do a good job developing those players. We have talked a bunch about how many players they are likely to send us. And, we're hopeful that in addition to goalies, we end up with 5 or 6 position players to start the year. Interesting on the goalie front, they actually signed Kavanagh, who was the Kelly Cup MVP from Troyes.
Yes.
That goalie room in Boston is interesting place right now. What ultimately happens between now and the beginning of hockey season, I think will be fascinating. I can't imagine it looks exactly the same as it does right now, but that's not what the Bruins say. But if that's the case, we could easily end up with RV and Kavanagh in Portland to start the season, and that would be quite a pair of goaltenders. It would be I'd love that if that's how we started the season. But a lot of time between now and when the first puck drops in mid-October.
Yeah, he was awesome there at TR, so it was really great to see that signing. And to your point, looking at what Boston did, not just July 1st, not just the draft and landing Hagens, which I thought was phenomenal, and but going back to the trade deadline, I mean, Sweeney, I kind of call it a masterclass of what he did to Colorado and Toronto in trading Carlo and Coyle. He got a haul. Yeah. Completely reloaded this team, and I've already had some episodes talking about July 1 and some of the moves that were made. But to the point, Providence is loaded. I mean, absolutely loaded, top to bottom. You just referenced it. It's got to have some good positive implications for the Maine Mariners this year, right?
When you look at who they have signed, who they got either at the trade deadline or they drafted, there's a lot of people in Providence. And, I think we should be the beneficiaries of that. Now, in any year, you have injuries, You have people that get waived. Things can change. But as of right now, I think that Providence team looks incredibly strong. And the good news for us, a lot more talent than they have positions for in Providence. And as I said, it's up to us to convince the coaching staff and the Bruins, Don, Evan, that we're a great place for them to develop young players. And so we've been working very hard on that. This coaching hire will be important in that as well. We certainly don't want to hire someone who they don't have confidence in. On the other hand, it is our person to hire, so we need to balance those two. As I said, the great news is, Evan Gold could not have been more helpful over the last 45 days in terms of us building our roster. Then when this coaching change occurred, helping us, he's probably come up with, 20% of the names on our list, and incredibly helpful. Just been a great partner so far.
Great to see that partnership. And really going back to the initial question, great to know that you're feeling so much better about those relationships here 9 months later. Just great to hear that, because that's obviously going to do nothing but benefit what we see here on the ice in Maine. And of course, we know right now 3 players signed. We know we have a few other qualifying offers out there. And, I guess we've talked a little bit about this already, but just team building right now without a GM in place, what are your expectations as you're going through the hiring process? You got to still build the team. What are your expectations right there?
So we, I think, have had really good dialogue with our players who finished the season in Maine. And I would expect that there'll be more announcements in the near term in terms of people who have signed. Obviously, the departure of Terrence has put a bit of a wrench into that process. If you're a player, I think you really want to know who your coach is going to be. Completely fair. So you'd asked about timing. I think balancing those two, getting the right person, but also having someone on board soon will be important. Look, Tolks, who will also be part of the process here, is really taking over primary responsibility for recruiting. We're also lucky to have an incredibly strong captain in Willem DeVoe, who's been really engaged in this process. I do think that the lineup will continue to be a bit fluid, until the CBA gets signed. I think, Europe is somewhat attractive to players, certainly from an economic perspective. And, right. People always seem to think, oh, geez, I get to go spend the year in Sweden and, they pay me more money and give me a car. And, unfortunately, I think it's a tougher existence than that. You don't speak the language. You don't necessarily understand the system. You're not playing with the guys you've known since you were a kid, in development hockey. So I would expect that not only for us, but for other people, the Europeans will continue to try to steal folks from us. But I think we feel very good about the core. And, for us, starting with signing that core, then, working on the folks who we've extended qualifying offers to. We have another 10 days or so to work with them. I think we'll have a pretty full roster. And then you put in, 6 to 8 folks from Providence, and it's a very full roster. So we feel good about it, but the sooner we can get a coach in place, the better. You'd also love to add, a real scorer between now and the start of the season. You'd love to add, a real shutdown defenseman between now and the beginning of the season. So, our wish list is still out there and still something that we need to fill. But that'll be Toltz's responsibility, and then a new coach as soon as we bring him on board.
Great to hear. We'll be really interested to see how it starts to come together. I promise you, Dexter, and I promised you last time too, I'm not going to ask you about the affiliation agreement right now. We're going to table that one. Going to give you a pass on that one.
No, I'm happy to give an update. We had the 1-year extension, which was the automatic extension by Boston, actually, on April 1. We have talked to them about engaging before the start of the season. I think we all feel as though the agreement that was close to being signed last year continues to be very close to being signed. Ben, we talked about it. I think the real issue for the Bruins at that point was, there were a lot of other priorities other than signing the affiliation agreement. And to the extent that they could push us off a year, I think that was just a really easy thing for them to do on exactly the same terms. We've continued to talk about it with Evan. He really is the point person on that. And my goal, this may not happen, is to try to get it signed by the time we start the season. I said that last year, and we didn't do it. But I actually have significantly less concerns about that than I did when we bought the team in September last year, just because I think our relationship is so much stronger, and I think they really are sincere in wanting to sign a long-term agreement with us.
Great news. And really the question I kind of want to ask around this, and this is kind of in lieu of what we're seeing in Lewiston, Maine right now with the whole juniors thing with the Nordiques and the Maniacs, and that's a whole mess that I don't really want to get into, but your own lease with the Cross in Portland, where do you stand with that?
We have agreement on basic terms. I have a markup from the county, and I think it'll be very administrative between now and signing that, but we've agreed to all the major economic terms and feel really comfortable with our relationship with the county. And now we just need to paper that agreement.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, seeing the fan engagement and the attendance last year, there's no reason why the county wouldn't want to keep you guys right where you are, right there in the heart of Portland. So that's good news. Another one around facilities. I know you kind of mentioned practice facility. We've talked about it before. Any developments that you can share with us on the future of a practice facility?
Yeah, we're working really hard. We think we've identified a location and are in the process of trying to secure land in that location. I was in Portland yesterday, and Sam Murray, who's head of our sales, has also taken this on as a project. We're looking at designs. We're looking at hiring an architecture firm. And so it continues to proceed. I did say to Sam yesterday that my priorities were hiring a new coach, getting the lease signed, and then the practice facility. Not that it's not important, but we've just got a couple of items between now and the end of the summer. Is in the have to do category. And so, it's always a question around priorities, but we continue to move forward and be really focused on building a new practice facility that'll be the home, for the Maine Mariners in terms of facilities, in terms of locker room. Obviously, we'll continue to have everything that we have at the Cross, and we won't minimize that. But, just quite frankly, someplace these guys can leave their equipment year round, has more storage. It'll be, additive to what we have at the Cross.
Gotcha. And I assume that the team will still be using the Trobe for practices as well, like they did last year.
Certainly this year we will. I think once our practice facility is built, I'm not sure how much we will. And the challenge with the Trobe is that there are no locker room facilities for us. So our guys literally get changed at the cross into all their stuff with skates off, shoes on, drive over the Trobe, get out, go in, put your skates on, skate. Then you go back to the cross to shower. Great thing about practice facility is you'll put your stuff on, walk out, practice, come back in. Treatment rooms will be there. We'll have a gym. It'll just be a more convenient setup, and we think a great recruiting tool for players.
Good. Can't wait to see as that develops. And as you said, I think it'll be a huge recruiting tool to have a brand new, bright, shiny facility out there. Hopefully with my paint on it. But we'll talk about that later. I couldn't resist. We're having a bad year, so any numbers I can get,
Do you get impacted by too much rain in June and no one wants to paint their house?
1,000%. 1,000%. Yeah. I'm not going to name my company because they're not sponsoring my show. So, but I think anybody in the industry, 13 Saturdays with rain, it affects our contractors, it affects our weekend warriors, and we're down fairly significantly. Chance to make it up, it's been nice the last few weeks, so we'll see what goes on. But it's they always say weather's never an excuse, but man, it's a reason. It's a reason, right? It really is. So anyway, last question for me. We do have a couple listener questions here. Of course, a couple weeks back, theme nights were produced or were announced by the team, and one that came out that really caught people's attention was a Portland Pirates night. So putting two and two together, that must mean that you've got that legal work done and you must own those rights.
Let's see how to best answer this. Okay. We are really excited about our Portland Pirates theme night. We're really excited about the opportunity. And, we've been working on being able to do that. It's not actually something that's been on my plate. I've just asked people to make sure we do it. And I think, these things are always far more complicated in terms of where exactly the ownership is and what rights that party has. Let's just focus on the fact that we're going to have a Portland Pirates theme night, and we're really excited about it.
Perfect. And that's all we need to know. That's great. Well, once again, I want to say thank you to all the listeners for all the great questions. We had a lot about coaching and GM and things like that, but I do have a couple others in here. One from a Mandy Jordan asking, are you re-signing Jacob Hudson?
Let me say that we are. Jacob did a phenomenal job last year, huge part of this team. And we would love for him to be part of the team next year. And we're doing absolutely everything we can to make that happen. And stay tuned for some announcements over the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Very good. Another one here from a Mike Nicholas. Dexter, I'm assuming it must be nice to head into the offseason with a full season under your belt now. Besides the obvious, like fielding a good team and now a head coach search, what are you looking to accomplish between now and opening night? And I kind of think you've actually answered a fair amount of that already now that as I reread the question.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for the question. Obviously head coach search is at the top of our list, whether it's head coach and GM or just head coach GM. Next up is getting our lease signed and we're comfortable with that or confident about that. We just need to get through the legalese of the written document. There's a lot of other stuff that our team's working on, whether it's ordering jerseys for our theme nights or whether it's working on getting our foundation up and running so that we can be making some grants by the beginning of the hockey season, or it's working on the design and purchase of the new practice facility. There's just a lot on people's plates right now. My one pitch here, our sales team is working hard on renewing season tickets and group tickets. We've seen really incredible response, and would tell people that, love to have you make your purchase now. We're running well ahead of last year. And so make sure you get seats that you want or games, please jump in sooner rather than later to make those purchases. But there's a lot to do, Mike. The team continues to be really excited and engaged.
Great. Yes, always there's no off season for you guys, right? That's just kind of how it goes. Last one here from SLU 1974, talking about expansion in the ECHL. Of course, we know Greensboro is in this year, New Mexico coming next season. That brings us to 31. Are we expecting a 32nd team to line up with both Ottawa and Columbus not being represented in the league at this point?
Yes. In fact, even though there has not been a public announcement, I will share that, in fact, there has been a 32nd membership that has already been granted and paid for. It's in a fast-growing city that has committed to build a new $250 million arena to house that team. That team, I believe, is scheduled to start in the 26-27 calendar year. Now, there has been talk in the NHL about expanding the NHL. In the ECHL, we will continue to try to match the number of teams in the NHL. So there is the opportunity, or potentially the opportunity in the future, for additional ECHL teams to match the NHL, but we will not go above the number of teams that the NHL currently has.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'll just add a follow-up here. Any juice around Manchester, New Hampshire? They got that great arena right there in the city.
They are not one of the cities that has been mentioned as a destination for a new team, or at the top of destinations for new teams. Look, I know both Worcester and Portland have geographic blocks on Manchester, but I will tell you that, given my conversations with the owner of Worcester and our view, we'd be happy to have a team in Manchester. It would be great from a travel perspective, great from a rivalry perspective. I hope that Manchester, in fact, comes up with an ownership group interested in bringing an ECHL team there. As you said, they have a great arena, and I think it would be fantastic for sort of New England ice hockey to have another team in Manchester. And I don't view it as being at all competitive with our fan base. I view it very much as being accretive if that opportunity comes up.
I'll be curious to see how that all goes. I can't wait to hear who that 32nd team is. I'm sure that news will come out when it's appropriate. Well, Dexter, that's what we have for you. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are and your schedule, so really appreciate you coming on. And with all the news we've had the last week or so, great to hear from you.
Ben, thank you for having me on. I always love the conversations. I look forward to hopefully getting invited back before we start the season to talk about where we are, or quite frankly, hopefully getting invited back to talk about our new head coach in conjunction with head coach GM. You are a huge advocate for our team, the Mariners. Thank you for everything you do. Thanks to our fan base for being engaged, and look forward to our next conversation.
Well, appreciate that. Yeah, you will definitely be back on. We'll have plenty to talk about as you hire a coach and we get the CBA done and we get a roster filled up. So there'll be plenty to talk about. Maybe we can have some more whining and crying about our Boston Bruins as we go too. But anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening today. I do appreciate that. If you do like what you're hearing, of course, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And until next time, everybody, be kind, show love, and God bless.